Welcome to the Peaceful Worldschooling podcast, featuring your host, Angela Harders. We're committed to cultivating a peaceful world beginning right in our own hearts and homes. Together, we believe that the world is our biggest and best classroom, and the people and places in it are our greatest teachers. So I invite you to join me on the adventure of a lifetime, beginning with a conversation that can change the world. Hello, and welcome to the Peaceful Worldschoolers podcast, where we are committed to cultivating a peaceful world beginning right in our very own hearts and homes. My name is Angela Harders, and I'm a special education teacher, gentle parenting author, and a proud worldschooling mother to two amazing children, Sophia, who is 7, and Benjamin, who is 3. Today on the Peaceful Worldschoolers podcast, I have the privilege and honor of introducing you to Miss Leah Stine. So Leah, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so happy to have you.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. All right. So before we get started, would you mind just sharing with our audience a little bit about yourself and your family?
Sure, definitely. I am a mom of 3. I have 2 boys, ages 12 and 9, and a little baby girl who is about 15 months old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, but it's working very well. I've been homeschooling for about 8 years now, and I kind of just started because my husband's schedule is crazy because he's a chef. So it was I was at the doctor's office and decided, you know what, I'm just not going to get this form, and we're going to try it for kindergarten. And here we are 8 years later. So it's worked well for us.
That's amazing. So actually I feel like you kind of jumped right into my first question.
Sorry.
I wanted to ask you. No, that's perfect. I wanted to ask you how exactly you decided to homeschool. Like, how did you make that decision to kind of transition to homeschooling, or were you all always homeschooling from the beginning?
Well, I never planned on homeschooling. My oldest went to preschool at a church, and a couple of his friends' parents decided that they were going to homeschool. So I started considering it, and I was like, no, that's weird. That's for like weird people. It's not for me.
Yep.
And then I was thinking more and more about it. And my husband's like, no, they need the socialization. They need to go to school. They need to be able to have their friends. What happens when they go to prom or don't go to prom? These are the life events that, they need. And like I said, I was at the doctor's office. I was getting his physical done to start kindergarten. We had even went to the school and did the bus ride and all the stuff.
Oh, wow.
And I'm getting the paperwork filled out, and I'm texting with my husband back and forth. I mean, it was, the one where you have to hit 3, 3, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 to get the letters.
Yep.
And I was just like, we need to try it for kindergarten. And he's like, okay, we'll try it for kindergarten. So we tried it, and that was it. I mean, if I didn't homeschool them, they would rarely see their dad.
Wow.
Today, I mean, he works in the schools now, the colleges.
Mm-hmm.
So his schedule's a little bit more normal. But when we started all this, he was working in hotels, and he was working, he'd go to work at 10 o'clock in the morning, and he wouldn't get home till 2 o'clock in the morning. And that was normal. And that was 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week.
Wow.
And if he had a day off, it was like a Tuesday.
So was your husband like on board with the decision to homeschool, or do you feel like it kind of took him some time to adjust to the idea?
Well, it took some time and a lot of, it's not really that weird. It's, there are things, and you know what, when it comes to prom time, if there's not a prom, I'll make one.
I love that. And it's interesting that your husband, it seems like his main concern was about the socialization aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's one of the most common arguments that I hear when families are thinking about homeschooling. It's like the first thing they say is, well, what about socialization? How are they going to socialize? And
The worst.
It is. And especially as a teacher, I always thought that was so weird because, I'm like, have you ever stepped foot in a classroom? I'm like, most
Right.
teachers are
Everybody
like,
be quiet.
yeah, everyone be quiet. You got to raise your hand to talk. Don't talk to your friends. You need to do your work. So I feel like as homeschoolers, I think they get more opportunities to socialize than kids that are in school. Would do you feel the same, or
Oh
is
yeah.
socialization?
Well, it really depends on the family, because there are families that don't socialize. They say, okay, we're doing school, everything else falls to the wayside, and we don't have time to go out. We don't have time to go out.
Yeah.
But if you make it a point to make sure that they're getting that socialization, it's going to be a non-issue. We spent that whole kindergarten year making friends.
Wow.
That's what we did. We made friends all year. We played.
How did you do that?
Well, where I'm from, Virginia Beach, there's a huge homeschooling community. So kind of one friend led to another friend, and then we kind of made our little clan of friends. And some came, some went, but for the most part, we stuck with the same friends. We still have the same friends that we started with an addition of some other random people and other connections that we've come across. And I feel like they're solid friendships. It's not like the fleeting friendships.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like it was that hard, really. I mean, because I made that effort. Just like when we moved in February here to Fredericksburg area, and once we got settled, I joined this local homeschooling group, and I'm like, okay, we're signing up for this. Is it stressful? Yeah. Is it time consuming? Yeah. But you know what? They're starting to meet people. They're making friends. I mean, they're also wrestlers. So their wrestling club, they make friends right off the bat. So that's helpful too. And apparently half of their wrestling friends homeschool too. So that works.
That's great. So you have them in like formal activities like sports and wrestling, but you also took that initiative to really seek out friends on your own. And I think it's interesting too that you're so right. Like there are families that do choose to kind of not socialize as much. But if that is something that's a concern for parents, I think it's important to know that they can, like there are.
Oh, it's easy. There's with Facebook and Instagram.
Yep.
There's so many opportunities to connect with other people who are like-minded, who are doing what you're doing, who are looking for friends, even if they sit here and do a Zoom call with their friend.
Yeah.
And there's even online classes now, like face-to-face stuff where the kids can play together on these classes. We don't do any of those, but there are them.
Yeah, I love that. And even for us too, I think that was a really big part for me too. In my first year of homeschooling was, I didn't want just friends for my daughter, but I realized like I needed friends too as a homeschooling mom. I'm like, I need friends that are in this journey as well that can help me and come alongside me and kind of build our community and build our tribe where we are. And
yes.
Yeah. And one other thing that you said that stuck out to me too was that, your husband mentioned he was concerned about them missing out on prom. And your response to that was, well, if it comes to that, we'll just create our own,
Right. I mean,
and
why not?
I love that it's like you can see these things that you want for your children to have and to experience, but being homeschooled doesn't limit them from being able to have those or experience those things.
Right. Well, and then also, but I look back, and I also look back at how important my prom was. Was it really though? I mean,
yeah,
I remember it, but it wasn't like a impactful moment on my life.
Right.
But I'm also a lot older. I guess as a teenager, it's still important to some kids, but if they don't know any different, are they really missing out?
That is very true. Yeah. A lot of the things that we think are important, it's like we have these emotional attachments to certain ideas. And a lot of times that's just not what the reality is, or, even different kids have different perspectives. I mean, I know kids that go to public school and they could care less about prom or homecoming or any of those
right
things. Yeah.
It just all depends on the individual, and also like what you introduce them to. I mean, as a homeschooler, you're responsible for introducing them or not introducing to them to stuff.
For sure. And one of the other things too about homeschooling, I teach an introduction to homeschooling class. And one of the things that I do in that class is I share about the different kind of homeschooling styles. So my family's homeschool style. We call ourselves peaceful world schoolers. Partly because I don't like the term unschooling, but I was wondering if you could share with us, what type of homeschool style does your family choose to adopt?
Well, we loosely based on the Charlotte Mason homeschooling style. I say loosely because I'm not strict with it. I don't know all the ins and outs of it. It's a very in-depth thing to do if you're going to, cross your T's and dot your I's and do it how Charlotte Mason would want you to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't have the time for that. I'm sorry. I just don't.
Yeah. So for people who are listening that maybe are not familiar with the Charlotte Mason method, could you explain a little bit about what that is or what that looks like for you and your family? I know you guys don't follow it strictly, but
right.
I guess in theory, what it would look like and then how it looks for you guys.
The best way I can kind of describe it is it's based on good literature, based on biographies. It's based on living books where you're reading, and it's not just reading facts and facts and facts and facts. It's about a story about George Washington, but it's true. It's a true story about how George Washington grew up and all the things. And there's a lot of books like that. And it's based on you treating your children like they are living beings and like they're little humans, little adults that are going to grow up and to be adults, and not just some child who is dumb and doesn't know anything.
Right.
So like one thing like she says is to read the Bible from the Bible, don't read a children's Bible.
Oh, wow.
Because they can grasp it. You're not giving them the credit that they deserve by reading to them like a baby. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
And I know I'm not verbing that right. And I'm sure that the strict Charlotte Masoners would probably be like, what are you saying? But that is my take on it. And that's what I kind of do our school as. I do a lot of nature studies. I do, we are actually using a gentle feast this year because it's our first year I've ever really bought a curriculum because I just couldn't build mine. I just didn't have it in me this year because we moved, I had a baby, all the things.
Yeah.
So I was like, if we're ever going to start school this year, I need to buy a curriculum. So we started with a gentle feast and it's been going great. I'm just plugging in the stuff. I mean, the hardest part has been combining my kids in different subjects because their age is far enough apart that I can't combine everything, but close enough that I can combine some things. So
I was wondering about that because I know you have 2 older children, but then you also have a daughter that's 15 months, you said?
Yeah.
Yes. How does that work to teach? Like, how do you manage teaching 2 older children while also having a 15-month-old all at the same time?
Luckily, she's really good. She's a very good baby. So how our day looks is she gets up at like between 6 and 7 every morning. So she wakes up, does her thing, eats, and then when the boys wake up, we all eat breakfast. And then I put her down for her nap. We start school at 9:30. We do timed lessons. So anywhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes per lesson, depending on what subject it is. And she normally wakes up right around our break. So we have a 20-minute break where everybody gets a snack or does whatever they want to do. Normally they eat because they always eat. And then we go back in and we finish school by 12:30. So for that time when she's in there, she's fed, so she's happy. And she just plays with her toys. And she has free reign of the room that we have our school stuff in. We call it our rec room. We have like big bean bags and all her toys and our school table. And so she's actually really good. Like, luckily, she's a very good baby.
Well, that's good that you're able to kind of manage both. And I guess it helps too that she's still, taking naps and things like that. So
yeah,
a little bit more focused time.
I'm not sure what that's going to look like. I hear that girls will like sit still every once in a while and like color. I don't know if that's a real thing or not, but
yeah, well, mine are opposite. So I have, my daughter is 7 and then my son is 3. And so with her, I was very used to, she was very independent in her play and she would sit and color or play with.
What's that like?
It's amazing. But it's, my son he's different, he wants to be in everything and climb on everything. So I feel like with him, it's hard to just trust that I can let him, play independently.
You can't.
Um,
You can't.
they're so different, but it is definitely something that I practice even with my son, giving him opportunities that he can practice playing independently, or giving him, like a space that he's able to sit and do art, like in his chair where I know he's not going to end up painting the walls or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's, kind of how we handle that. But hopefully she will be, able to kind of grow with you guys, as she's continuing to grow up, and you'll find your new groove. And of course, I mean, things always change over time too, right? We all go through different seasons in life, regardless of our age, where, we need to make adjustments to how we do things. And we always end up figuring it out at the end,
Right. Yeah. I mean, it'll all work out. It's just a matter of how it's going to work out.
Absolutely. And it always does. And that's one of my favorite things about homeschooling is that, no matter what we're doing, I feel like we have the freedom to try these different things and figure out what works and what doesn't work for us. And if we try something and we hate it, we can change it,
I did that a lot.
Yeah.
I did that a lot at the beginning. I pieced together my stuff because I was like, you know what, we just don't really we weren't planning on this. I don't know what I'm doing. I used a lot of printable worksheets and workbooks and random stuff. And I did that for a long time, for my first 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And then my other son, my younger son, started homeschooling. So I was like, okay, I need to do something a little bit different. So I ended up buying like a math curriculum, but like everything else, I'm still kind of piecing together. And I kind of regret doing that because I feel like I have a lot of gaps that I'm filling in now that I've noticed over the past like 2 years. Like in like language arts, spelling, some things that like in the Charlotte Mason, they're like, just trust the process. And and whether I'm not doing the process right or whatever the case may be, the process isn't working. So, or it wasn't working. I mean, now that there was just, they were having a problem with accountability. And so I started off, last year I started doing tests and quizzes and things like on spelling and on math, because they were acting like they weren't learning it. And they would be like, oh, I don't get it. So we would like stay on the same thing forever. Especially my oldest son. And we like didn't progress in math a lot because we were doing, I can't remember the math we were doing, but it was like, he just wasn't getting it. He said he wasn't getting it. But as soon as I started giving him quizzes, he was like passing it all with flying colors. And so he was getting it more than he was thinking he was getting it.
Yeah.
And we could have moved forward a long time ago. So now we're like zipping right through it because he's getting it. And I'm like, if I ask you a question and you get it right, we're moving on, and he's like, well, but I'm like, no, if you know it, you know it. We switched to Strayer Upton math and love it for him. Is it Strayer Upton? No, my gosh, Saxon math for him. Sorry, the youngest is doing Singapore. But he loves it. I feel like it's very easy to just move on if we don't need to do it. Every section has a review with a mixed practice. So I can just say, hey, today you're doing your mixed practice to make sure that you're still on point with everything. And we're just moving right along. It's nice. But so that was my biggest issue with not having a set curriculum where the gaps or switching a lot. But that doesn't mean don't switch a lot, because you need to switch until you figure out what works. I mean, we still tweak. So.
Yeah. And I mean, and I love that, that we have that flexibility to be able to find something that will meet their individual needs. And that, as you mentioned, like you can kind of go as fast or as slow as your child needs,
Right.
So we're actually unschoolers, so we don't use any sort of like formal curriculum. And are you familiar with unschooling?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so we don't use any like formal, curriculum or anything like that, but I can definitely relate to feeling that same kind of way, of being, I was really nervous at the beginning when we first started that my kids would experience gaps or that they would be behind, that was a big fear that I had. But as I'm in the midst of this, I'm really getting that, like there is no behind,
Right.
each of our kids are on their own unique path and their own unique journey, and I can meet them exactly where they are and not have to worry about them being ahead or behind or anything like that.
Yeah, a big thing that I heard when I first started homeschooling was like, oh, all the homeschoolers are advanced. They're all advanced. They're all ahead. And I'm thinking, and I'm like, oh, cool, my kids will be ahead, And then I'm like, why do they want them to be ahead? Why can't they
Yeah,
just be where they need to be?
absolutely.
And I have 12 years to get them where they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel
and,
like,
and even answering that question of like, what does that mean where they need to be, like
right,
who defines where my child needs to be when they're 18 years old? Like who says
right,
that they need to be doing XYZ by
right.
the time they're 18?
Yeah, that's true too. I
Yeah,
guess I guess my where they need to be would be if they want to go to college that they can get in and be
yeah,
successful.
yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of parents have expressed concerns about that if they choose to homeschool their kids, they're like, oh my gosh, how will they, get into college, or how will they transition into college? And you're right, like homeschoolers typically, regardless of the method that they've used to be homeschooled, whether it's traditional or Charlotte Mason or Waldorf or unschooling or eclectic or
Mm-hmm.
whatever that looks like, they typically tend to do very, very well when they do go on to colleges and universities, because I think they have that, homeschoolers in general typically continue to have that love of learning, and I feel like they maintain that natural curiosity that we have when we're born.
And also I've heard that I was talking to somebody who was in a college. I can't remember if it was a professor or what it was, but they had homeschoolers as their students, and they said they're the best students
Mm,
because I think it's because it's all new to them.
mhm.
They're sitting in a classroom like that. I mean, they haven't been doing it for 12 years.
Yeah.
They haven't been stuck in the same classroom listening to a professor drone on,
Mhm.
because that's not how they were taught. So it's a new adventure when they get to college. It's, it's
It
something
really
different.
is. Mhm.
So,
Yeah, and they have that like motivation to figure out how to do this new thing. And especially
right,
to the college level, like, they're choosing to be there, right? Like no one's
right,
forcing them to be in college. Well, hopefully no one's forcing them to
right,
be there, um but yeah, like when you're choosing your classes and you're choosing your career path, and you're choosing what you want to learn about and what you're wanting to engage in. I think there's a lot more of that like buy-in and that own, intrinsic motivation that they have of like, I want to learn this and I want to figure it
right.
out, like you mentioned.
Yeah. And I feel like I know my kids follow a lot of what they want, like what they want to do. And there's that ability to do so. My
Mhm.
oldest son loves aquariums. He loves fish tanks. He started out with 10-gallon and now he has a 75-gallon.
Oh
And
my
he's
gosh.
yeah, and he's currently breeding, has 10-gallon tank, which he's breeding molly fish to make feeders for the fish that are in the big tank. So
Wow.
he's really into it. And he had a pond when we were in Virginia Beach, and we're gonna do another one once we figure out where we're gonna put it.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, and he loves it. So he's following that passion. And
Mhm.
he's, you can ask him anything about the fish in his tank and he will just spew off those facts. I mean, ask him how to spell a word and that's another story. But he knows all about his fish.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing that he has that opportunity to explore his passions in a way that's meaningful for him.
Yeah, I mean, there's been days where he's like, my levels are off. Can I skip school today?
Mm.
And I'm like, okay, well, that's a valid reason.
Hmm.
Get your fish tanks right. So it happens.
That's really cool. So he's really passionate about fish. What are your other children passionate about?
Well, Caden, my youngest boy, he is passionate about bugs.
Hmm.
He
My
is
daughter too.
he pins, but like we got him a pinning kit for Christmas, and
Oh, cool.
so he's been pinning them, and we look them up and we learn all about them. And he really likes lizards too, but that's a new thing since we've lived here. So he has a connection with a eastern fence lizard that he's refusing to release. So we're gonna see how that
You have a
goes.
pet.
Yeah. Oh, we need more pets. We got chickens, dog, cat, fish tanks.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too that you were saying that you start your, I guess, formal schooling around 9:30 in the morning, and you said you
Mm-hmm.
guys are done around 12:30.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow, that's I mean, that's amazing. I mean, when we think about, most children are in school from, 9 o'clock in the morning until 4 p.m.
Right.
and they're really only doing like a formal schooling thing for about 3 hours a day.
Right.
What does the rest of your day look like?
Well, for me, I normally feed them lunch and then I send them on their way. They go outside and they play and whatever, unless they have chores to do or what responsibilities that they need to do. Normally put the baby down for her second nap at that time, and that's when I work and I
Mhm.
get some of my work done that I need to do. Um, and then we reconvene around dinner time, and there's right now we're doing our handicraft is cooking. So one night a week, each of them have to help me with dinner.
Mhm.
So around 4, I call somebody in for that. And then we eat dinner and then they go to wrestling. I take them to wrestling. I come home, put the baby to bed. My husband picks them up on the way home. So I work after the baby. Well, I don't really work. I normally clean the kitchen and clean up all the baby toys and, normal life stuff.
Mhm.
And then they get home from wrestling. I give them a snack. They get a shower and then they go to bed shortly after.
That's awesome. And I know you said that your children like bugs. I'm curious, is that what inspired you to write your book about a boy and his butterfly?
It is. It is. Yeah. Because,
Tell us a little bit more about this book. So, for those of you who don't know, Leah Stine is not only a mother, not only a wife, not also a homeschooling mom, but she is also an author and an illustrator. And so, was that your first book that you published, Leah?
yes, my only book so far.
Okay, so Leah has published a book. It's called A Boy and His Butterfly, and I will be sure to share the link. It is available on Amazon. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Awesome. So I'll be sure to share the link for that book if you would like to check it out. Can you tell us a little bit more about that book that you wrote and illustrated?
Yeah, it is a book about a boy and his butterfly. It's a book that goes through the life cycle of a butterfly, from a monarch butterfly, from egg to butterfly. And we've always raised monarchs every year. We haven't done it for the past couple years, but
You buy that like kit from Amazon?
no, we had at our last house we had butterfly bushes and we
Oh,
had plants, some milkweed for the monarchs. So when we'd see them lay the eggs, we'd take them and put them in the house
oh, okay.
so that we could raise them, make sure they were successful, and then release them,
Hmm.
because monarchs are, they need to stay around. So we're trying to do our part and help them out. So anyway, so I thought a book about that would be great to help people understand how the actual cycle goes, and they could teach their kids about it. And it is a living book, so it's not dumbed down.
Mm-hmm.
But it's probably, I think I have a friend who read it to her 3-year-old and she understood it. And then, she also has a 5th grader who enjoyed it also.
Hmm.
So it's a pretty broad age range. And me and my friend Jen actually illustrated it, because I do more realistic paintings and she does more abstract paintings.
Mm-hmm.
So in the book, there's a combination of abstract and realistic. So the butterfly and the cocoon and that stuff is all very realistic, while the plants and stuff are more abstract.
I love that. So I published my first children's book I wanted to say 2 years ago. And so
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah. It's about essential oils. So I created
Oh, I love essential oils.
yeah, me too. So actually I created a series. It's called the Crunchy Kid series. And so the first one that I did was about essential oils. And I am not an artist at all. And actually, I feel like being a homeschooling mom is what kind of gave me that push to do this book. I don't know if you had a similar experience, but
Mhm.
my children learning and pursuing their passions, I was like, I want to do that too.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, and
Everybody should have that.
we should, it's like cultivating a love of learning isn't just something that our children do. Like it's something that we get to do too. And even as
Right.
adults, we have our own goals and dreams and passions and interests. And yours is clearly writing. Like I know you're passionate about writing.
Yes.
And so being able to give ourselves those opportunities that we can pursue our own passions, even as adults, I think is so important, to model that lifelong learning for our children.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So that's wonderful. And I know that you are someone that is passionate about writing. I'm curious, how do you encourage and inspire your children to also write?
They hate writing.
Oh, yeah, they
Hate
do.
it. They just don't do it unless I like convince them to.
Hmm.
So that is just, it's not their thing. I can't I can't make my passion be their passion.
That is very true.
So we do a lot of read alouds where I read to them.
Hmm.
Um, not because they can't read, but because they absorb it better, they like it better. It's time for us to spend together.
Yeah,
That,
we
they
love
feel
hearing
like
read alouds.
right, they feel like I'm doing it too. And so we really enjoy that. But the writing part, they don't enjoy it at all. I try
Hmm.
to get them to last year, well, like I said, this year's been a little wonky, and last year was really wonky because the baby and everything
Hmm.
and the move. But the year before, every day we'd start our day off with writing a poem,
Hmm.
saying a poem. We'd each say a poem. So I wrote them all down. So I have like a book of all of our poetry from the year,
Oh, that's
which is pretty
beautiful.
cool. So that really helped them get creative.
Hmm.
And there would be random times throughout the week where my youngest would be like, I got a poem. And he would just spew off some poetry.
Uh-huh.
And it
Well,
was
and
cool. So I would like to start
that
that up
is
again.
that is writing, like being able
Right.
to come up with a poem from your brain, even if you're like speaking it out loud and you're the one that's transcribing it, like that still counts as writing,
True. I
you
guess I
know.
don't think of it that way, but that is true. That is true.
True. I mean, truly. And I my one of the ways that I try to encourage, because again, we don't have any curriculum. So one of the
Right.
ways I try to encourage my daughter to write is I got one of those 3-year journals. I don't know if are you familiar with those?
It sounds familiar, but I don't know if you're talking about the same thing I'm
Okay,
thinking.
I'll have to share it with you, and I'll make sure that I put a link for that in the description because that is one of my favorite things that I could have ever bought. But it's a 3-year journal for kids, and so basically it has one question that they answer every day, and then it gives them 3 lines. So you go through the book, and then at the end you go back and you start from the beginning, and
Oh, okay.
it's so fascinating because they're able to see how their answers change every year.
Right.
And they could see their growth, or it's sometimes the answers stay the same. And it's cool to
Yeah.
see that some of the things about their answers stay the same and some things are different. And so that was one way that I encouraged writing with her. But I started it when she was 5 turning 6. And so at that point, she couldn't, like, she could write briefly, but I mean, she wasn't gonna write
Right.
a big long explanation about something. And so that was one of the things that we would do. If it would say, like, what animal do you feel like today and why, she would write like dolphin, and then I would write out whatever her, and like the why part of it.
Right. Oh, that's neat.
um,
That
and
sounds really neat.
yeah, it is. It's been really cool. And then now over time, I'm kind of giving her, like, it started with doing exactly what you did. Like, she would just say her answers and I would write them, or I would try to, like, give her the opportunity that she could write as much as she could or as much as she wanted to. And then sometimes she'd be like, Mom, can you just write this answer? And I'd be like, sure, and
Yeah.
it was okay. And then now she's doing more of it on her own. And so, I guess that for me, that was really helpful to find, like, an organic way, like a natural way that she could have something meaningful to write about, something that was meaningful for her.
Yeah. It's
And
like just prompts.
yeah, like, and there are questions about her. It's like everyone likes to answer questions about
Right.
themselves, you know?
Especially as a kid.
Yeah. And then now that we're going through it for the second time, you know, now she's like fascinated by it because now she can see what she wrote the year before.
Yeah.
And so that's been really cool for her to do that. But I you know, for anyone who's looking for natural ways to encourage their children to write, I think 3-way journals or 3-year journals are a great way to do that. And yeah, so maybe you guys will have to get, now
Yeah,
that
I'm
Christmas
gonna,
is coming up, you'll have to check that
that's
out
a
for
good
Christmas
one.
and start in the new year or something like that. I think it's a great way to start the year off.
Are they dated pages or is it just you fill in the dates?
Yeah, so it has the date, and then at the top, you know, it has like one day, you know, for every day, and then you just fill in the year. So it will say 20 with like 2 dots next to it. So
Okay.
2020 or 2021. But it will say, you know, January 1st, January 2nd, and it goes
Okay, gotcha.
through the whole year. So it has all, you know, 365 days, and it has a different question on every single page. And they just, you know, go through and share their answers. And so that's one thing we've added to like our nighttime routine,
Yeah.
is answering our one question of the day. We're a little bit behind because you know, I'm not.
So are you going to go back and fill in the missing days?
We do, yes, we do.
Okay.
So if we, you know, if I miss a day or whatever, you know, we go back and like catch up. So sometimes I'll go back and be like, okay, we're a week behind, we need to answer 7 questions tonight. And so we'll go back and do that. But I mean, she loves it, and it's a great way too for me to get to know her and you know, just talk and connect and have those like conversation starters,
Yeah.
I guess, about, you know, her thoughts and her opinions. And some of the questions are funny and some are you know, more serious or deep, you know, deeper questions. And it's really profound to hear how her, you know, 6-year-old self is answering these really deep and profound questions. So
Right.
yeah, so I definitely encourage parents to check that out. That's been a really fun thing that we've done,
Oh,
that I
nice.
really like. And so in addition to writing books, I know that you also help people with writing. Actually, you write show notes and blog posts, right?
Yes, I
For
do.
their podcast. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, my business is Leah Stine Writing. I actually started about 3 years ago, but I just repurposed and relaunched my business doing just strictly writing, which is just awesome. I love it. And I help self-help, self-development podcasters. So pretty much anybody who helps somebody else is who I want to work with.
Hmm.
And I help them with their show notes, so their description, because you want people to listen to your podcast. So you have to have good, solid show notes and blog posts for their episodes.
That's awesome. And actually, before I started recording, we were talking about that you know, I have this podcast, but I never really thought about you know, turning the podcast into a blog or something like that. And so for other people that might have a podcast, I think Leah is a great person to connect with, because I saw on your website that you make a distinction between a transcription of your podcast versus a blog post. Is that correct?
Right. Yes.
So what's like the difference, I guess, between having a transcription versus having the
Well,
blog post?
a transcription is really not going to pull anybody in. So it depends on what your goal is. If you're just looking for SEO and you're just looking to have it out there, a transcription's fine, but nobody's going to read it. So don't expect anybody who would rather read to look at it, because they're not going to. But if you have a blog, that's a standalone thing. So like you could have your podcast and then you have your blog. And like for me personally, I love listening to podcasts, but I have 3 kids who always talk or make noise or interrupt me. And it takes me 3 days to listen to a 30-minute podcast unless I'm working.
Yep.
So I can read an article in 5 minutes. So I would rather sit there and cook dinner and read my blog post on my phone
Mhm.
while, the multiple interruptions, which is okay because I'm reading.
Yeah.
But so that podcast that I wanted to listen to is never going to get listened to. And I'm not going to get that information because it's not in a blog.
Mm.
So there's a lot of people out there who don't have the time to listen or who would just rather read.
Yeah.
And the podcasters who aren't taking advantage of making a blog are missing all of those people.
Mm.
They're not connecting with them. They're not getting their information to them. And in turn, those people are missing out on them.
Mm. That's very, very true. And I want to thank you for like even bringing that to my attention, because now I'm like, maybe I should start a blog that goes with my podcast or something now,
Yeah.
because you're right. And
Well, you can get your SEO from that too. You get your SEO and a
Mhm.
standalone story based on what you've already talked about.
Yeah, I mean, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. That's really cool. So if anyone is listening and you do happen to have a podcast, but you're passionate about podcasting and maybe not as excited about writing, then you want to make sure that you reach out to Leah and have her help you with the writing piece, because that is something that she is passionate about and gifted at. And so she'll be a wonderful person to know and connect with as you grow your podcast and grow your audience to not just meet the needs of listeners, but also meet the needs of readers.
Thank you.
All right. Do you have any tips for someone who might be starting a podcast like me?
I would say just do it. Just go for it and have fun with it. Enjoy yourself. If you're out there, I mean, depending on what you're doing it for, if you're doing it to help people, just feel that truly and you'll help people.
Mhm.
You're going to attract the people that you are meant to attract.
Mm.
You're going to connect with the people you're meant to connect with.
Yeah.
If you're putting yourself out there in an authentic and true way, you're going to attract those people. So that's all I have.
That's beautiful. And also I wanted to see if you had anything, if you could communicate one message to someone out there who's listening that is thinking about homeschooling, is kind of on the fence, what would you want to say to a parent out there who's considering homeschooling but is not quite sure yet? What piece of advice would you have?
I would say when you make your decision, really figure out why you're making that decision. If you're making it out of a panic because of COVID, or if you're making it out of a panic because you really want to do it and you just, now's the time, or if you're just have put it off and now you feel like you should do it, figure out why, because that's going to be your most important thing. That's going to be your driving factor when it gets hard. It's going to be your driving factor when you're like, I'm going to send you to public school. So you need to make sure you really want it, because it's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. It's not for somebody who's just on a whim wants to do it. You have to really want it. You have to feel it. You have to want to do it. You have to show up for your kids, because they're going to feel it if you're not feeling it.
Mm.
And they're going to rebel.
Yeah.
Because I went through that last year because I wasn't feeling it. I had the baby and we had a lot of struggles with the move and with COVID and all the things. And it definitely reflected, and the kids didn't want to start school this year. And I was like, why? Every year we do this. And they were just like, it was bad last year. And I was like, oh my God, it was. It really was. So I was like, that's it. I'm not doing that again. I'm not going to let it be like that again. So make sure that you have your why in line.
And what's your why?
My why is family time, is to be with them, and so to be with my husband and to have that good, solid family dynamic. Because not everybody gets that opportunity, and you only have kids once. You only have them when they're kids once.
That is so true.
So once they grow up, they grow up.
They do. And it goes by so fast. And they're only little for so long.
I know.
I feel like I blink my eyes and
well, it's like now I have the baby. So it's like I'm comparing the baby and then my 12-year-old who's taller than me. And I'm like, what happened? Where did my little chubby cheek little boy go? And that's a thing that's in my face every day. I'm like, wow, I gotta cherish all of it.
Yeah.
And I want to cherish all of it.
That's beautiful.
So that's my why. My why is for family. And I'm not going to lie and say that I don't threaten them and say, you're going to public school if you don't shape up. And I don't know that I would actually send them or not, but haven't had to come down to that yet.
Well, hopefully not.
Yeah.
I think being able to be home with our children is one of the greatest gifts that we can give to them, to be able to have that time with us as their parents, and to be able to connect with them in meaningful ways and share literally the best part of our day. Because I don't know about your children, but I feel like even for me, like I am my best in the morning, and then it's like at the end of the day, I'm just exhausted. And I look at all these parents that send their children to school, and I'm like, you're missing out on the best part of your kid when they're early in the morning, when they're awake and they're excited and they're passionate. And then at the end of the day, when we get them, they're tired and they're stressed and they're like decompressing from all the, crazy that they experienced at school. And it's like we get that leftovers, I guess you could say, like at the end of the day when they're stressed and tired. And
well, and I feel like we know each other better. Like, like the Beat the Parents game, for example. Like we can't even play it because we know everything about each other.
What is the Beat the Parents game?
It's a game that it asks like different things about the parents, like the kids against the parents, and they ask different facts, like I don't know what their favorite color, things like that. Like there's cards. There's two different games. It's board game and a card game. The card game though, we can't even really play it because we know everybody's answers. So it's like it's boring because we know everything about each other.
But I mean, it's good though, because I can't tell you how many parents that I've seen as a teacher that are just so disconnected from their children. And
it's not their fault. It just happens. Life happens.
Yeah.
I don't want it to seem like, that they're bad parents or, because that their full-time jobs, that they're any less or they're doing it wrong, because they're not. Mm-hmm. But there's definitely a difference in the relationship, and it also depends on how you make that relationship when you are with them.
Mm-hmm. That is very true. I mean, just because you're home all day with your kids doesn't necessarily mean that you're present with them.
Exactly, because there are times where I'm not. I mean, I know it because I have a lot going on. I have a business to run. I have 3 kids. I have a house to take care of. My husband works. He goes in at like 6:30 every morning, and he's home. He brings the kids home from wrestling at 8. Mm-hmm. So I mean, he's literally gone all day.
Yeah. So you're really having to hold down the fort, for the majority of the day.
Right.
And it's a lot, but and so even though like you're with them all the time, and I know I definitely have that too. Like, last year when we were home, we did virtual online teaching. And so I was physically here in the house all day. But even though I was here, I wasn't fully present with my children. And so even if you are homeschooling, it's important to remember that you can be physically there and not emotionally like connecting with them or investing with them. So I hope that any parent that is listening to this will be just reminded to make the most of every moment that you have with your little ones, because it goes by so fast.
I know everybody says that and you don't believe it, and then you like blink.
Seriously, yeah, it's like you blink and it's gone.
Right. Exactly.
All right, Leah, well, I wanted to ask you too, if there are people that are listening that want to get connected with you, maybe they want your services about, blog posting for their podcasts, or they're wanting to connect with you to learn more about homeschooling, how can people get connected with you?
My website is leahstine.com. It's Stine. So everybody spells it wrong. But I do have 2 different social media accounts, one for more of my homeschooling and one for more of my business.
Okay.
So my business is Leah Stine Writing, and then my homeschooling is The Outside Thinkers. I used to have a blog based on outside studies and things like that. So that's based on more nature studies and things like that. So you can connect with me anywhere you'd like. I'd be happy to chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you so very much for joining us today on the Peaceful World Schoolers podcast. I hope that this episode was a blessing for all of you listening today and for your families. Remember that new episodes are released every single Tuesday, so be sure to subscribe so you will not miss out on a single episode. If you would like to continue supporting me or get connected with Leah, please be sure to check out the show notes. Maybe Leah, you can help me write the show notes for this one.
Definitely.
That would be awesome. So yeah, take a look at the show notes, and I want to thank you guys for continuing to just share in this share this podcast with your friends and with your family, and to continue to spread a message of love and connection and peace with our children. All right. I hope that your day is as wonderful as you are, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.